Congresswoman, you've been one of the leading voices against excessive U.S. involvement in this war in Ukraine. What do you think the U.S. interest is in that battle?
You know, I'm not really sure, and I've never understood it. This is a war that started really back in 2014 under President Obama and then Vice President Joe Biden. And you and I watched it accelerate. We had a front row seat in Congress in 2022. And I was just thinking back fondly of when you were in Congress and we had, very deep discussions when we had our first vote to fund this war. And I remember one of the things I was telling you is the reason why I'm voting against funding it, or one of the reasons, is because I thought it was going to have such horrific economic impacts all around the world. And we saw that happen. We saw inflation go up because once the sanctions were put in place on Russia, we saw a drastic change in basically world trade and trading power around the world. And we saw the BRICS nations become stronger. We saw Russia start selling their oil to many other countries and even selling their oil and gas still to our allies, but through third parties. We saw China get stronger, and yet we saw the poor get poorer, Matt, and that is what has continually happened. I think that there have been extremely corrupt connections in Ukraine, intense money laundering of U.S. tax dollars, and weapons that the U.S. has supplied to Ukraine have been resold to our enemies. And I'll just say this, Matt. If you handed me a doll and told me to show you, point to a place on this doll where Russia has hurt me, I don't think I could do that, because I think the decisions that have been made in Washington, D.C., well, I can tell you that's hurt America a lot worse. So
we heard
I
about
really
that
want
hurt.
to see peace.
Yeah, we heard about that hurt. You represent a number of farmers. I represented farmers in North Florida. And after that initial round of sanctions, the cost of their fertilizer went up substantially. The cost of planting rose. And these were farms that did not have huge margins to be able to absorb that for a war that they didn't really understand as being central to any of their interests. So tell us, Congresswoman, how do we get out of this? How do we disentangle the United States from this territorial battle in Europe?
I think it's through economic deals, and I think it's through trade. I think it's through business deals. Look, let me tell you something. I'm a businesswoman, and President Trump is a businessman, and that's why I understand him, and that's a lot of why I support him. It's the art of the deal, and I am hoping we see that begin today in these historic meetings, this peace summit in Anchorage, Alaska, between President Trump and President Putin. I think this is exactly what America needs, and I think it's what Russia needs, and I think it's what the world needs. And America needs to reestablish itself. We don't need BRICS. We don't need those nations to become stronger and stronger to where our U.S. dollar is so weak. It's already weak already. And, if you're a dual working couple in America today making over $100,000, well, you're basically the working poor. And that is the result of these nonstop foreign wars, U.S. involvement, and nonstop sanctions on our so-called enemies. I was watching the news before this show, Matt, and I'm watching Fox News is vilifying Vladimir Putin and vilifying Russia as much as possible, because they're hoping the president sees all this and they're hoping that his team sees it, and they want to completely derail all of this. And then I flip over to CNN and they've got John Bolton on there, who wants nothing more than World War III. So it's pretty disgusting what is being broadcast on the establishment media. But if you ask every average working American, people that I know in my district, do they want to continue funding this bloody, disgusting, basically wood chipper of a massacre? No, they never wanted to fund it in the first place. Do they want to get rich? Yes. Do they want to make money? Yes. Do they want the U.S. dollar to have a massive impact? Yes. Do they want to buy cheap products? Yes. And so I'm hoping we see some great economic trade deals. And I think President Trump is the right man to get it done.
In the moments leading up to this historic summit, we saw Ukraine engage in a major offensive inside of Russia. What do you think that means, and what does it tell us about where Ukraine sits in President Trump's push for peace?
Well, famously, President Trump said to Zelenskyy, "You don't hold the cards." And I think that is the truest statement there is, because Zelenskyy can't stand on his own feet. And unfortunately for the Ukrainian people, they have a dictator, because he canceled elections in their country, took away free speech, took away freedom of religion, punished Christian churches, punished journalists, took away the freedom of press. So, anyone that thinks that they're fighting for democracy in Ukraine, absolutely not. That's a dictatorship.